we're gathered here today to witness the holy matrimony between Xbox/Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. King, I guess, is the full name of the.
Everyone forgets King.
Everyone forgets King, but it's a very important part of the acquisition.
Yeah, it's arguably the most important part of the acquisition.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways. So I gave you guys both lists of articles. The first one I pulled was is just going over the deal by the numbers.
There's a typo in the URL. Nice.
Yes, there you go. $68.7 billion is what Xbox is paying Microsoft. Something that's interesting is basically they're evaluating. That evaluation is the price per share that they're paying on this is their harassment issue moment. It was the stock price of the company of Activision last summer before any of the news dropped. So that's a very interesting nugget as to how they came by this price.
How much has that dropped since then? Because I saw somewhere, I want to say it was either the original journal post or a follow-up maybe on Bloomberg that it was the price that Microsoft is paying is basically like a 60 to 70% premium over the share price now.
Yeah, so the price, so the share price when the news hit, I guess was like around like $90 per share, and then like it slowly like started decreasing over the summer, and then at its lowest was like last Christmas, and that was specifically around the time the news about specifically the Bobby Kotick news dropped. The price, it almost dropped to about half. $57 seems to be the lowest, and it kind of went back up, I think, as like time moved on from like the hottest hotness when it came to the news. And right before the deal, it was $65 a share, around there, and then it's now skyrocketed back up to $82 a share, which is about as high as it was last October. Yeah. So
can I put the cost of this into perspective for people who maybe don't know
Please do.
comparatively? So anybody who has heard the number out there who doesn't quite understand the magnitude of it. The largest video game acquisition of all time prior to this was actually like last week, which was when Take-Two announced that it was going to acquire Farmville publisher Zynga, the mobile company, and that deal was for $12.7 billion. Again, this deal is for $68.7 billion, and 12.7 was the record, the largest one. In fact, before 2022, the largest one was only $8.6 billion with one of Tencent's acquisition. So like a 5-time increase over the record, which is truly insane. And then another thing.
It's like 17 times the amount that Disney paid for Lucasfilm and Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's like a couple of billion shy of being the amount Disney paid for Fox.
Exactly.
It's like literally almost the same number if you do a little bit of rounding. Granted, that rounding is like billions of dollars, but on paper it looks very close.
The other thing I want to put this into perspective with is this isn't just a big deal for gaming. Like, it's not just like a large acquisition for gaming. It's a large acquisition, period. This is Microsoft, not Xbox, but Microsoft's biggest acquisition by like $40 billion. Their biggest acquisition before this, which was 2016, was when they bought LinkedIn, which was a $26.2 billion deal. And again, this is a $68.7 billion deal. Like, it is truly one of the largest acquisitions like possible. It is like astronomical.
And it's all cash. They just had it kind of sitting around. It's not like I gotta go to the bank and maybe look at it.
Write an IOU.
Yeah, all of our Game Pass subs were just going into an account,
in their Scrooge McDuck vault of gold coins.
Yeah, we got some
It's
other interesting stats in the chat here. Facebook paid, to put this in perspective, Facebook paid about $1 billion for Instagram back in the day when they bought that. Amazon paid less than that for Twitch, less than $1 billion for Twitch. And Do Sydney asks, how many Star Wars is that? It's probably over 15 times what they paid for Star Wars.
It's 17. I think it was
17 times for Star Wars. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so some other interesting numbers here. So around 10,000 employees work for Activision Blizzard currently. That's about the same, roughly, around as Xbox, from what I can find. But obviously, Microsoft as a whole is like tens of times larger than that. It's like over 150K on the low end, from the latest stats that I can find. So this is kind of like if Microsoft just bought another Xbox, essentially, in terms of employee size.
I had somebody, when I posted about this, somebody kind of was like, wow, this reminds me of when, like we were saying, like Disney bought Marvel and like Lucas. And I was like, I would actually argue this is like when AOL and Time Warner merged. Like that is the magnitude of the deal happening here, which is when you start to get into the debate of like, is this a monopoly? Is this, too big? Will this even happen? Which I think we'll get into once we get into some of these articles.
400 million people currently play Activision Blizzard titles monthly. This is this is the king part, right? For the most part.
Yep.
It's the Candy Crushes. What are the games? Is it? I mean, I guess we'll get into that later. But I don't know anything other than Candy Crush. The king.
It doesn't even matter. It's Candy Crush. like, look, my fucking mom is gonna be in the Xbox ecosystem without knowing. Like my Candy Crush playing mom, who's been playing for like a decade and has like more hours in that game than I've ever put into a video game myself, is going to suddenly one day wake up and be in the Xbox ecosystem. That's fucking crazy.
I mean, it's kind of nice because now when we get like, every now and again, like we'll get extra, like here's an extra month of Game Pass from Microsoft or whatever. We can give those to our parents now, which is great.
Yeah, like you can play Candy Crush on your tablet, Mom.
Jen, I was going to say.
My dad plays Forza all the time. He just likes to.
Really?
Well, he plays Forza 4. He likes to do donuts like outside of Edinburgh and take the Audi into a lake.
That kicks ass. I love it. I'm going to get my mom into Forza. And yes, Chad, I'll ask my mom to party up. I'm going to get my mom in the next COD game because it's like such an easy thing now, right? I just got to get her from Candy Crush to COD.
Yeah, the Candy Crush to COD pipeline.
It's going to happen now.
It is a slippery slope,
Yeah. They're going to put Master Chief in Candy Crush. That's my prediction for 2023.
I mean,
I would Master Chief in Candy Crush.
I would not be surprised. Part of the announcement also included the little tidbit that Xbox Game Pass has now reached 25 million subscribers. The last time I think they put out numbers, it was at 18 million last year. So this is a huge percentage increase for the subscription service. And this data point married with the Activision data point, I mean, you can see where this is headed, especially considering that no one else has come close to building the kind of ecosystem I think that Xbox has garnered with Game Pass, with cloud, with that PC Xbox cross progression. 30 internal game development studios once this deal has gone through, I guess this is total 30 following the acquisition of Activision. Yeah, so I guess this is 30 is around the number that it will be at once this is all done.
Yeah.
And Activision Blizzard agreed to an 18 million settlement over harassment and sexual misconduct. Oh, right. So yeah, so did that get so is that just done? The legal stuff?
Lawsuit?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that was in November, December. I don't know that those people have been paid out, but that was to be split between, I want to say, and you might have to check my math on this, but I want to say it was among like 1,000 employees, which is, not necessarily like, it seems like a lot of money. But once you start splitting that up, it's money that they can find in the couch over there.
Well, especially now that they just got fucking $68 billion in cash from Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bobby, himself took home a cool I think it was 156, 153 million just last year. So that's not a huge amount of money for them.
Zerniak,
I feel like there were some satellite lawsuits that came up after.
I mean, with these things, there
the main one?
inevitably is always more, right? There's always more that's uncovered, and especially now, I feel like the legal eye is going to be, hopefully, on the company more than ever. This has to go. I mean, we'll get into the legal stuff very soon.
Yeah.
But you got to think that this is going to draw some eyes, and the more dirty laundry is going to be aired.
Yeah, for sure.
Zerniak says in the chat, I do hope we discuss the thoughts on Bobby keeping his job. Don't worry, we are going to get to Robert Kotick. Yeah, so I wanted to bring up your article, Gio, the 4 key takeaways from Microsoft's Activision Blizzard bombshell, because it's almost impossible to fathom how this is going to change gaming. Trying to, I also feel like come up with, I mean, I think you and I, Gio, I haven't talked to Jen that much, so I'm curious your thoughts just generally on it, but this is bad.
It's really bad, y'all.
For like almost the entire part. There is some interesting / potentially good stuff that could come out of it in a more short-term sense, and I do want to talk about that. And I also want to talk about the fun stuff, and kind of put all of the bad thoughts away for like 20 minutes while we talk about that later on.
Sure.
But I think what you brought up in this article, Gio, was a really great, just kind of like, here's where we need to focus. So you say Activision gets a clean slate. This is probably, I think, one of the silver linings, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
I think we're all in agreement that Xbox seemingly has a better culture than Activision Blizzard, and is able
publicly.
to publicly. I mean, we've seen some stuff here. Go ahead, Jen.
I think like the recent interview with Phil Spencer in the New York Times, I want to say it was with Kara Swisher, like he was talking about like, hey, we have made some missteps in the past. They particularly referenced like this party in 2016 where they had like bikini girls dancing on poles and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think, they have, or Microsoft, is a little bit further down the path of, of progress than Activision is from like a corporate culture standpoint.
Agreed.
Yeah. Are they perfect? No. I mean, this is a very, it's a very boys club industry still, there's issues.
I mean, I feel
like
Go ahead.
Should be no illusion. There should be no illusions that like every company that you like is probably been terrible at some point. Like if they are a video game company that's been around for like more than 10 years, like they probably have a really bad reputation and we just don't know about it. Like EA, I'm sure there's shit there. Like I don't know. Again, I don't know this. This is all off the record. allegedly, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like it's always been a boys club, and these issues are not. Some companies are just better at hiding them than others. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
and I would point out that just like, yes, this is a particularly acute problem in the games industry, which does tend to, but it is just a problem of like the workplace and like large corporate organizations in general. Women get, less pay for similar work and, overlooked for promotions, in many different fields, but in gaming, it is particularly bad.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that, yeah, I mean it is particularly bad in gaming. I do think that it is a standout, particularly among the fact, just like with the way that like the marketing is geared and stuff like that, like especially for the very early days of gaming, like it really just was marketed to young boys and men, and those vestiges of the early game, like it just feels like it's very hard to rip all of that out of there. But yeah, I mean, compare if we're comparing Xbox's culture to Activision's culture, I think it's very clear, and with things you hear about employees who have gone on the record or anonymously talking about what they think of the merger. A lot of people seem to be generally happy about this deal because they think that it will fix the culture, and that is the hope.
Yes.
On top of that, I think that outside of the culture aspect, Activision, outside of let's just remove the king element because we'll touch on that. But obviously, it kind of just became a COD machine, and a lot of games and studios were sacrificed at the altar of Call of Duty, and it'll be interesting to see where Microsoft goes with that, and we can get more into that later. But, I think that the other kind of opportunity here is that I think that Microsoft does want to tap into some of the IP that had been shelved or forgotten because of Call of Duty and figure out a way to have their cake and eat it too. Figure out a way to keep COD this massive money-making machine that it's been for the last 10 plus years, while also reviving and hopefully thriving, because I think this actually plays into the next thing you talk about, Gio. Game Pass is about to get a whole lot bigger. I think that while they obviously want Call of Duty to be there, be an exclusive, all of these things, I think that, all the little tertiary and secondary games and development studios that can just make more content in general can flesh out that library and Game Pass in a much bigger way, and I think that that's equally as important to them as the COD machine. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. So 3 thoughts real quick. Number 1, I just want to tie a bow on the last thing and just say I agree just with what everyone's saying about Microsoft seems to be better with the way it's handling toxicity in gaming. It seems to be more committed to it, regardless of maybe we'll find out about their past at some point and what they've said about their past. They definitely seem to have a much better head on their shoulders about these things. So I ultimately do think it's positive. I think it is a silver lining of this. I expect that they're going to clean house more seriously than the board of directors at Activision, who got some dirt on them. If you look that up, got some real dirt on some of those folks. So just to tie that one off, in terms of this, I think the one place where Microsoft is in a really, really good position with Game Pass is they get to see the data. They get to put a bunch of old games on Game Pass and see exactly what people are playing, right? They get to put the game Gun on Xbox Game Pass for the 2010s, 2000s game Gun, and just see are people playing it? Do people like this game? Are a ton of people playing this game? That is
not
something.
Only that, if I could jump in,
Please.
They not only do they get to see the data of how many people are playing it, but it's how long are they playing it and what do they move to next and what do they come from? They get to learn a lot about the discovery. And let's not forget that Microsoft, is not primarily a gaming company, it is a technology company. So they are going to be able to make a lot of use of this sort of data about user behavior that, say a Sony with its rumored, new subscription offering might not be able to match.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they have so much stuff to add. I mean, Activision Blizzard, in recent years, they've really kind of toned down to a couple of series. Well, Activision, Blizzard as well. Blizzard really doesn't make a ton of games. They just support a lot of games. But when you think about the stuff that they're going to be adding to Game Pass, there's some really wild stuff that could come to it. All the classic Tony Hawk games could come to it. Crash Bandicoot games, or whatever. The big one being Sekiro. Sekiro is an Activision game. I feel like people forget that Sekiro is an Activision published video game that will probably come to Xbox Game Pass, which is whoa, that's kind of crazy. That'll be a huge win for them. So yeah, just in terms of, what are people going to get from this on the Xbox Game Pass side, there's going to be a lot of positive. There's going to be a lot of classic games that they're going to bring to it. And the more people play those games, I think there is probably a chance that they're going to revive some things, bring back some old franchises that people seem to be resonating with and love. I think you will actually get Tony Hawk, more actual Tony Hawk games, right? People are going to go back and play Tony
and
Hawk
more Crash Bandicoot games. And Toys for Bob was kind of subsumed in
tragic.
You'll be working on COD now, and it's now that is really not that's back on the table. Crash Bandicoot is back on the table after this deal, so that is a silver lining here for kind of classic platforming fans.
how disgusting is it that Crash Bandicoot is going to be an Xbox exclusive? Like, how much of a slap in the face of it that they're going to have both Crash Bandicoot as a Xbox exclusive and Banjo-Kazooie, like, at this point. Like, what? Come on.
And that is interesting
evil.
because I think that, you know, the other part of this that we haven't, I don't think, really seen, again, a lot of the seeds that Xbox has planted with not only this acquisition, the Bethesda acquisition, and all the other acquisitions that they've been making, right? We haven't seen the fruits of the labor. They've just been planting seeds. A lot of the stuff that is to come of that is starting next year. Like, is there anything of you know, unless the Hellblade 2 comes out this year, like, we're not seeing the big payoffs from all of this money that they've been pouring into these studios.
Do we know if Xbox makes money on Game Pass at this point, or is it kind of like the Costco $6 chicken that like gets you in the door?
Phil Spencer has gone on record previously saying that I don't necessarily. Again, this is Phil, the absolute master of saying everything and nothing at once. Basically, I think he said something like, the Game Pass model is working for Xbox. Whether that means they're making money on it, I'm not sure. Gio, you might have more insight there. But he is basically saying, like, don't worry, like, financially, this makes sense for Xbox.
Yeah, I think... Here's what I think is like ultimately what's going to happen here and why he's probably right. And maybe this gets into like away from the fun stuff and more the like doomsaying, but I think it is important. The fruits of their labor here will be that they're going to jack the price of Xbox Game Pass in the next year significantly. And the reason they are going to be able to do that is because if
they own everything.
Because they own everything. You're not going to have a choice. Like, everyone you know who plays video games will have an Xbox Game Pass subscription by 2023 because there's going to be no other choice. Unless you're just a Nintendo fanboy who's like, all I play is Mario games and Zelda games. Like, congrats. Like, you are in a great place to be right now, and don't leave that island. Because you are going to become reliant on Game Pass, and they're going to have you in their hand. So it makes sense for Microsoft because they're making people rely on Game Pass as something they need if they want to game, and getting people in at a really low price and like getting them really reliant on Game Pass as like a part of their routine, and starting to ratchet that up more, like $20 a month, you know, like maybe.
I mean, they might even go the Netflix route of it being like $1 a year. And before and you're like, oh, I can do this because like I'm not gonna subscribe to Netflix. Like, that is the model that they are going for. And one of the other, going back to what Jen was saying as well, you know, everything else that Microsoft brings to the table with that cloud tech, investments in AI, VR, AR. Like, I don't want to be the person that's talking about the metaverse because I think the metaverse does have very little to do with this, but also at the same time, it has a lot to do with it because like the technology that's underpinning that is also going to underpin the future of games. And if Warzone wants to get to a place where it is competing on that level, where Epic is talking about Fortnite being this metaverse thing, Epic making moves in connecting Rocket League with Fall Guys, with Fortnite, whatever that shit is. Microsoft has the technology to make that happen. That it does have the technology to elevate Warzone beyond just this battle royale gaming experience. Real quick.
I don't know.
Sorry.
I feel like
go ahead.
The subtext here is that like we should be concerned about Sony. You know, like where does this leave Sony? And like, oh, poor Sony. And it's like, I don't know. After the last like year or two, it feels really hard to root for Sony.
Of course. I mean,
we should be rooting for none of these companies.
Yes.
Like I'm gonna put my foot down on this. We should be rooting for none of these companies ever. Not to be the like anti-capitalist like killjoy.
No, dude, comrade, come on, let's fucking talk right now.
I'm rooting for Nintendo.
Yes. Well, you know what, Nintendo. You know what? I have so much to say about this. I do want to get to this comment in chat before I go off on a rant.
Yeah, let's talk about this. So Spiffy Fox highlights his message here. He says, "How do people already know what Activision Blizzard games will be added to Game Pass?" Phil Spencer went on record basically saying they are going to put whatever Activision game they physically, or I guess digitally, can do on Game Pass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I would add to this is like we can glean stuff from that, but with anything about this announcement, all people are doing is like reading between the lines of quotes. They haven't said anything about like specifically what games. They haven't said anything about what specifically Bobby Kotick will be doing. They haven't said like specifically anything because they legally cannot say any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And that I think is like the most important thing that I think people are that's going to be frustrating for people because this is not supposed to happen until like July 2023 or something like that. Like the acquisition is a really long ways away, and it could be even longer if the government intervenes, with it and is like, is this antitrust violation?
Yeah.
But like, if you see anybody, and like, what we're doing here is we're speculating just off like what makes sense, based off of history, based off of whatever. But like, nobody actually knows anything, and nobody is going to know anything. Like, this isn't even something where you're going to have stuff leak. Like this is going to be so confidential and so ironed out because like it is a huge legal thing for them to stay quiet. And I think we'll get into this more when we talk about Bobby Kotick and whatnot, because that's a huge part of that conversation. But if anybody tells you they know anything, they're wrong. They don't know anything about this. Like nobody knows except good old Phil and dirty Uncle Bobby, and like.
But if we look at what happened with the Bethesda deal, right, and say this goes in a similar vein, which I fully expect it to, if it happens,
agreed.
They're going to they're going to roll out the red carpet. There's going to be a huge parade. There's going to be a live stream with Phil Spencer sitting down with whomever. Hopefully not Bobby Kotick.
It won't be Bobby.
It won't be Bobby Kotick. Let's be real.
It won't be John O'Neill either.
No, it will not.
It'll be just Phil.
But they'll do a whole thing. They'll drop a ton of games, at once that they can. They will roll out more games over time, and this is speculation on our knowledge of how this industry works, and B, the precedent that something like the Bethesda deal set. So let's get into the legality. In your article, you do also mention about King and Sony. Let's talk more about those later when we talk about like the games and all that. But let's talk about the legality of this. So look, none of us are legal experts. Also, like, it's kind of, to me, what I am feeling is that the gaming industry is so... the government couldn't get its shit right with big tech. It couldn't get its shit right with Facebook. It couldn't get its shit right with any of these acquisitions. I mean, let's be honest. It's Facebook. And I think that the precedent set with that is that if Facebook couldn't get them to get involved, and I think also they're very distracted by the current, like, it's kind of like, to me, like, video games? Fuck it, who cares? I think that is going to be the sentiment.
If Congress can't grok the finer nuances of like Facebook and Twitter, like asking them to understand the ecosystem of like Game Pass and PS5 and Nintendo Switch is it's not going to happen. Like I think there will be some sort of roadblock, and maybe we don't see this deal close, in like April 2023. But I think this deal happens, and I think it happens before the end of next year.
I think it happens too, and I agree with everyone. I think the government does not pay attention to games, does not take them seriously enough to be like, you're gaining Call of Duty? Whoa, hang on, don't do that. But what I will say is that the government understands $70 billion.
Yes.
Like, that is going to be the thing, that it doesn't matter, like, what they're buying. It doesn't matter if it's video games. It doesn't matter if they were buying a Kleenex company. Like, the fact that they are spending $70 billion is going to turn heads. It is going to put eyes 100%. On it. Like, it is going to make it a very visible thing.
On
and
top
the fact
of the legal issues that have just happened with Activision, like, it's kind of like the best of times, worst of times to have made a deal like this, because Activision is in a very vulnerable position to say yes to a deal. And I do not, one thing I don't want to spend any time on is really going into who approached who was going to buy who may have bought who.
Yeah, of course.
Every fucking outlet, I read a new headline that's like, oh, Bobby Kotick went to Phil Spencer, and the other outlets like Phil Spencer went to Bobby Kotick, and actually it was Facebook that Bobby Kotick wanted, like all this stuff. But, it was this position where it was like, we can finally, like, we have leverage, but also, like, that might come back to bite us in the ass. And I do agree, money talks, right? $70 billion, it's going to draw a lot of eyes. And one of the things that Jacob Roach at Digital Trends, who is on the tech side, right? He's not
computing. He's on the computing team, yeah.
He compares this to the NVIDIA ARM deal, which was placed at $40 billion, and it seems like that deal is dead. But this kind of plays into an article that good old Mike Fahey at Kotaku wrote about how, as much as sure we'd like this to be, it's bad.
Yeah.
But it's not an illegal monopoly. And unlike the NVIDIA ARM deal, where it is like these two have competing products, where it's literally like you kind of buy one or the other, almost. There's only really one other player involved, being Intel, when it comes to, chips, and I guess AMD. It's way more murkier. More murkier than any of that.
Like Microsoft buying its way into the number 3 spot as like, the biggest like gaming revenue company. I think it's Tencent and then Sony.
Yep.
So the acquisition, Microsoft will be number 3. I think it would be a very different scenario from a legal perspective if they were buying themselves into a clear like front runner, top of the heap position. But that's not what this is. There's still Tencent and Sony to contend with. It's a huge step up for Microsoft, but still not quite on the level where I think it is like anti-competitive.
Yeah, I think what's more accurate is not to say that this is a monopoly, because I agree. Like, and they can get out of it so easily. They can be like, yeah, we own Call of Duty, but like EA owns Battlefield, so like, what's the problem? But like, I think it's the fear that it could become a monopoly, because like, at what point does that just happen under your nose? And at what point do they say, oh, by the way, we're buying Ubisoft next?
Right, exactly.
And like, okay. And I think this gets into a wider issue, which is that like, essentially what Microsoft is doing here, and they kind of signaled it with the Bethesda deal, is they are triggering an arms race. Like Sony is going to be backed into a corner. I don't think Sony wants to acquire companies like Square Enix. Like, I really do not think they do.
And I think the big X factor in all of this is Japan.
Yes,
these, like Sega has historically been approached by Microsoft to be acquired. They were not interested. Nintendo famously was approached by Microsoft to be acquired. They were not interested. I think you're going to see, that is and those are the, Nintendo in particular, like Nintendo can still exist in a world that is like dominated by an Xbox Game Pass in 2030, Sony, I'm less certain about, but I think there's still a place for, I think Japan is going to be a real like joker in the deck for this whole thing in the next few years.
Do you all think, this is like a thought that just popped into my head, do you think that the workaround here for Microsoft is going to be that they will try to get Sony to put an Xbox Game Pass app on the PlayStation and get Nintendo to put like Xbox Game Pass on the Switch? Is that the workaround? Is it like, yeah, we're going to put these games on if you put our service on your platform? Like, is that how they get around this?
I previously did not think that I thought that having Game Pass on PlayStation, all of these other competitive devices, I didn't think it would happen. I didn't think Microsoft would do it, and I didn't think Sony would be interested in doing that before the Activision deal. But this is the thing. I mean, this is what we're talking about. You are not going to be able to game without having Game Pass. It's just, the way that this thing works. It's the same thing with it really is the same. And I understand that these are competing products, but for example, Apple TV has Apple TV Plus. Granted, much smaller than Netflix, came out much later, but they have competed. They have services that compete with their services on that product. And I do think, even though gaming very different, I'm talking broad strokes here, but I think that it is an inevitable future. And I do think Microsoft now wants to force the other company's hand because there's just too much money to be made for everyone involved. And I mean, Jen, what are your thoughts on Game Pass coming to Switch, coming to Sony now?
Well, I mean, if I recall correctly, and this was maybe a year or two ago, before like the launch of Series X, like, you know, or Phil Spencer said something about like, we'd love to see it on Switch, we'd love to see it on any platform, which is a very classic Phil saying nothing, saying while appearing to say something kind of quote. But I don't know. I mean, like, I hate to sound like a narc here, but I don't hate Xbox. I really don't.
No, I mean, it's hard to hate them.
And, you know, like, I don't like the, you know, I'm wary of the idea of monopoly and, you know, like total control. But I also feel like there's been a lot of chatter. This is a bit of a sidetrack, but like, there's been a lot of chatter over the last, you know, 36 hours about like, well, you know, Sony should buy Square Enix or Capcom or FromSoft. And it's like, honestly, if Sony bought Square Enix, we'd get like 2 games out of them, you know, in 5. It would just be Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy 16, and then a Tomb Raider game. And that's it. You would not get The World Ends With You. You would not get Nier. You would not get, God, what is that like kind of card? Get Voice of the Cards. You would not get Bravely Default. Like, whereas like if Microsoft bought Square Enix, you would get all those weird games. You would get Chrono Trigger on Game Pass and like, you know, all these legacy IP that we can't really get on a modern console now. So it's I don't know. As someone who tends to lean towards like Japanese games and my preferences, it's, you know, that kind of really skews my perception of all this.
Also, you know, I think that, you know, we are living also in pre-Spartacus times. You know, I feel like we, you know, maybe in a year or two, we might be having a different discussion about like, because I agree with you. Currently, if Sony were to have bought, Activision, if they could have made that happen, if that was a world that we would live in, you know, if that was possible, you know, I would have been like, well, then now Activision really just makes Call of Duty. Like, you know, we're not going to get all these weird other games, but I completely agree, although I am curious as to how Spartacus would change things, and that is something we will get to later. But for right now, Kirasuru_IRL says, could you not call it at least an oligopoly now between those 3 companies? I mean, yes, that doesn't, I think, change anything from a legal standpoint. And if there's anything that the American government is going to do less about than a monopoly, it's an oligopoly.
I also think that the gaming space is a little bit wider than we give it credit for. You know, it really isn't just Tencent, Sony, Microsoft, right? You have Nintendo, you have Epic Games that like is really rising as a superpower and is going to be like in the same conversation as those companies. You know, very, very soon.
Epic is the company that like I am thinking of that is going to not only be able to do something, but actually do something to compete. You know, this arms race, I don't think it's a Microsoft Sony thing. I do think it is a Microsoft Epic thing, especially considering that this deal, think about Battle.net, right? Like this comes into now Xbox is a major player in the PC gaming space. And I think that Epic really didn't want that.
I think Epic.
At the same time, like, you know, if you look back on the last 2 years, like, what have the biggest, most talked about, most influential games been? And they're not Fortnite or Call of Duty. It's, you know, like Among Us and Hades. Like, there are these kind of like out of nowhere things. So I think there is still a space, even with with these big looming ginormous companies, there is still a space, at least as it is now, for these kind of like independent visions to like break through. And we still have like these great, like, you know, indie incubators like Devolver and Annapurna. And I don't think those are going anywhere. And I think, go ahead.
My friend Kyle Irv, who's a writer at Hard Drive, and he is a game designer who created the great game Dodo Peak. he had a tweet yesterday during all this that I just think is incredible, which is the biggest gaming acquisition of all time happened while the hottest thing in gaming is a little browser app where you guess a word once a day. And, like, I think that really sums it up. Where it's like gaming is so wide right now, and like these companies are going to buy gigantic things and dominate the space. But like there are still all these breakthrough things, and there are these games that are huge. Like you said, Among Us, and like Valheim last year, right, was this like gigantic weird hit.
But money talks, certainly, but I think like this is not an audience or a group of people to be like underestimated for their tastes. Like look at like Google and Amazon's attempts to kind of like buy a seat at the table with and Stadia and like the various like Amazon game, like they have all the money in the world, but like nobody's buying what they're selling.
Yeah, totally. And I think that again, we'll talk about silver linings. Thank God it isn't Facebook acquiring Activision. Thank God it isn't Google trying to like double down, triple down, or Amazon. Like at the end of the day, if there's anyone I trust to like do, and again, talking explicitly on the creative development front versus the, on the monetary front, right? Like Xbox is going to allow, hopefully they haven't been more off than they can chew, and they can actually make sure that their grand plan to have these companies thrive, because when they were buying things here and there, they were buying a small studio here, they bought Double Fine. I was like, great, awesome. One of the things that Tim Schafer talked about, which I think is very poignant now in retrospect, he was talking about how he's like, I just wanted to create. I didn't want to have to worry about our financial situation. I didn't want to have to worry about payroll. I didn't have to want to worry about like what we're going to do if our game doesn't sell, like all of these things. And so hopefully Microsoft is able to now apply that to these new studios. I do want to ask, and maybe I'm jumping the gun on like some future discussions here, but especially with, one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot is, currently there is a push at Activision to, I don't want to jump the gun and say unionize, but like there is organizing happening. There is labor movement happening.
Yeah.
And it is, I think by far, especially with the Raven software, the QA people, currently on strike. It's happening right now. It's been happening for the last month. Inverse, actually, under Jen, has an amazing article talking about the fact that Activision has not come to the table, which I think makes a little bit more sense now that the Microsoft deal was on the plate. Because they were probably like, we don't have to do fuck all about this. Like,
that's why we're selling.
Literally.
I think, we have a follow-up piece going up tomorrow morning where it's basically like that is the concern among these kind of current like Raven QA testers, and in QA I think particularly because they're all employed on like a kind of contract basis. They're not full-time employees. That is a big concern, is that this deal has kind of given them license to just kind of sit on their hands and deny reality for the next year and a half. And by them, I mean Activision and kind of senior management at Activision.
They won't do anything in the time until this deal closes. There's no way. I've been joking that this is a $70 billion, the most expensive union busting attempt ever. That's the joke that I keep making about this. It's like, it truly almost seems like Microsoft was like, if your fucking staff unionizes, we're all screwed. We gotta shut this down.
Go ahead. Sorry, Jen.
Interviews with like the teams behind like Deathloop and Grounded and stuff, and one of the things that they often highlight is that like, being under the Microsoft, the Xbox umbrella, kind of they leave them alone largely. They kind of let their existing company culture exist as it is. And I don't think this is the approach that anyone wants to see Microsoft take with Activision at this point. Like, Microsoft has, with its, acquired studios in the last few years, been very kind of like not wanting to interfere. But I think, and I don't know how possible it is, but I think, there needs to be some sort of precedent set by maybe Microsoft leadership, because I don't see it happening from Activision, to kind of, make strides for like, cultural change within the workplace, maybe even before Activision becomes part of Microsoft.
What I was going to kind of build off from there is, do we think that they're just going to, again, it gets a little complicated with the part-time and freelance employees, whose contracts are always in flux. But do we think that there is going to be, for the most part, a clean transition? Everyone gets to keep their job.
No.
Yeah, I mean that's my big worry, is that we're going to experience that there's going to be massive layoffs, and key people who are involved in some of the organizing that's happening right now are going to be gone. And that to me is
media companies, and we know what acquisitions tend to mean, and it tends to mean that like this is going to be real good for the people who have corner offices, and it's going to probably be bad for most of us.
Yeah, the reorg is coming. That's the word, reorg.
Redundancies.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, again, there's all speculation. Obviously, no idea how this is going to shake out. How bad do you think it's going to be?
Impossible to know. I mean, it's really hard to say. Like, I think they will do a lot of cleaning house of people who are in some deep shit there. You know what I mean? Like, I think you will probably get
a lot of more senior level.
Yeah, like definitely that. But yeah, I mean, after that, it's really hard to know. I mean, for me, it's hard to imagine that like some of these people that are like under contracts, but in like a weird position or whatever, like not in the company. I don't know. Like it's hard to imagine those people are really getting their due here. It's who knows, but like they're, I almost don't want to say, because it's just like dreadful to think about the possibility of it, but I would imagine that it will not be like everyone keeps their job and this is normal. But I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I do wonder if this is very like Pollyanna optimistic thinking, but I do think Microsoft is in a position perhaps to set a precedent by like, hey, we're going to bring QA into the fold and treat them like the rest of the development team, and not like kind of, second class citizens in the office. And we're going to make a point to have like our QA teams are full time with benefits. I think that would be something that could have a broader impact, like industry wide, because like generally speaking, QA people are the ones who are kind of like on these rolling contracts where they're on a game for 3 months, they're off a game for 3 months, and it's just not a great way to live. And I think that's a big part of the strike at Raven.
Definitely. And going back to the organizing efforts as well, I think we kind of mentioned, how this affects that at some point. As far as we've heard, it's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
Polygon did some reporting on this that said nothing has changed. Digital Trends will have something up hopefully later this week where we talked to them a little bit more, got some more quotes, and they're basically like, yeah, I mean, this is no different. Like we're going to continue organizing. It's not like,
cool, I mean, there's essentially no deal happen, right? Like for the next year, nothing is actually changing.
So none of that will change. And whether or not Microsoft gets rid of people who are part of the organizing, like, I mean, realistically, some of those people are probably going to lose their jobs, and I don't necessarily think it's going to be related to that. It's just like a lot of people are probably going to get moved around. I don't actually think that this is a gigantic union busting effort.
No,
as much as it's funny to say, but
tangentially a union busting effort,
right?
It's okay. This is a tease for teasing articles. I wrote something for Input that might be going up this week or next. Basically talking about how at the end of the day, as much as we can't hate Xbox, right? We can't bring ourselves to hate them. Phil is a genuinely nice guy, it seems, and for as much as a CEO can be nice, At the end of the day, Microsoft is a multi-billion-dollar company, and companies are inherently anti-union. They just are. And there is no way this deal was made without there being discussions about the current organizing happening at the company.
There was a great piece from Kotaku late last night where it's like the headline was "This was inevitable," and it's just kind of like, I think we've all noticed this, particularly in the last 2 years, where it's like, don't you have enough fucking money? Like, why do these have this kind of pernicious, virulent, cancerous desire to just get bigger and bigger and bigger because they can? You know, it's nobody, no single person, no single entity needs that much money, you know? And I think that impulse, as much as I've weirdly become an evangelist for Game Pass, and I like it, despite this being the first Xbox console I've ever owned, there's something very unsettling about that, where it's just like, what more do you need out of this situation?
And that totally speaks to you know, the you know, there not being like a strict union busting maneuver here. But Microsoft is not going to want a seed of union sentiment and labor movement to be planted at Microsoft. And there is going to, I think, be a the grass is greener here. You don't need to organize. We've got cookies in the kitchen. We've got an espresso machine, but like in this way of like, that means, hey, your life is going to be less shitty here. And I do believe that the lives of these developers, hopefully will improve under Microsoft. But that has historically been a way to absolutely prevent a union forming, right? There being kind of any movement there. And, it's a silver lining if Microsoft can stamp out. Because if there was a continued labor movement under Activision, right, say the sale didn't happen, and there was somehow, a slim chance, but AAA development started to move in that direction of more people organizing, more unions being formed. Eventually, it would come knocking at Microsoft's door, and if Microsoft can somehow make all of that disappear, no skin off the nose.
Yeah, I think that's how you're going to see it materialize. Like, I don't think they're going to necessarily like go through as crazy of like transparent union busting efforts that Activision is currently doing, which are like the things they're doing are nuts. But I totally agree. You're going to get that grass is greener thing where like they're going to fire a bunch of people that were like problems. You know, they're going to get rid of a lot of the people that were in positions of power who were abusing power. They are going to be a lot friendlier, I'm sure, towards people who are organizing and be like, hey, like, yeah, we totally hear you. We hear your issues. Whereas like Activision Blizzard was not, like they really were not adopting that. Yeah. And I think, you'll see things like that where they just try to come off as the good guy. And I think my guess is that they think that they can convince people that like, there's no need to organize because the problem's solved. And I would guess that they're really confident about that.
Yeah,
I think you and Tom are like onto a good point here. Like as someone who grew up in the Bay Area, I remember reading all these kind of like glowy pieces about like what it's like to work at Facebook and Amazon and all these kind of like Bay Area tech companies. Like they have Michelin star chefs and like all these really nice bean bags and foosball tables. And like, who wouldn't want to work here? And it's like the gag is that you're working like 100 hours a week. And yes, you're getting a good salary, but you're not getting a salary for like 3 people to live in a very expensive part of the country. Like, and eventually kind of the glamour of it wore off, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a kind of similar pattern repeat with, maybe with a shorter lifespan, but with Microsoft where it's like, oh, it must be so great to work here and they pay so well. And like, I can take like Tai Chi classes and, whatever.
Exactly.
They have so many great perks and like, who needs a union when I'm making $200,000 a year? And it's like, but honey, you're working like 100 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And as someone who is I'm a part of the the bustle committee, right, for our union that we're currently working on. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of my time every week, and
I'm grateful that you're for your efforts.
yeah,
as
well,
a-
it's I mean, but the thing is like the bullshit, just general bullshit that happens, out. It's an incentive, right? It incentivizes you to continue to do that work. And,
Hmm.
game development is so grueling as it is.
Yeah.
And the evilness of Activision, outweighed, I think, any kind of it was just keeping people like running like machines because they were like, I am done putting up with any of this. So yeah, I'm really concerned at the moment, like everyone can kind of take a breather once this deal is
Mhm.
done. Well, I mean, we'll see. Again, like there's so many things up in the air with that, but it's just something that I'm definitely kind of like keeping in the back of my mind, and I think a lot of people really should keep an eye on that, and see, hopefully the people who are currently organizing have made up their mind, and hopefully they can, plant that seed at Xbox, and an even bigger domino can be formed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the hope.
The impression that I get is that currently Xbox is a good and desirable place to work within the games industry, but the bigger and bigger that they get, the less incentive that they have to continue. The senior management has for it to continue to be a welcoming and good place to work.
Right.
Before we get into the fun stuff, all right, we can forget about
We'll take
our
a
problems.
breather. Yeah.
Before we
Like
do,
a tantric sort of podcast.
I do want to talk about the big B, Bobby,
Bobby.
who obviously is a central figure in all of this. Not the only son of a bitch at Activision we know, but the son of a bitch.
Yeah,
I think.
true.
I think it's a foregone conclusion that he's out after this deal, despite the reporting on this is all over the place. But where do you guys think that's going to lay? Do you think he makes it to the deal? I think there's a chance that I don't know. Yeah, what are your takes on that?
I think he's definitely going to be out. Again, nobody knows. And
Yeah.
any reporting that you're seeing saying one way or another is just people interpreting lines. Nobody knows. They will not tell you this. This is not information that will come out. Like Microsoft would not have, on the day that they announced this acquisition, been like, we're going to acquire it and also get rid of the CEO. Like, it is just realistically not a thing that they
Yes.
were going to say.
Legally not a thing that they can say.
Yeah. Even
Phil
even
Spencer.
putting aside,
Phil
like,
Spencer in an interview pulls out a gun, and I'm going to
Yeah.
shoot Bobby Kotick in the
Yeah.
fucking head.
He's on a timer.
That is because it would tank the stock of Activision leading into the acquisition.
Yes.
So then you get
Yeah.
into like hostile takeover territory where it's like, oh, the current leadership is a complete pile of shit. So
Right.
we'll acquire after he leaves. Like that's kind of gets into like legal financial gray areas that like they just cannot risk doing at this point.
Yeah. So anybody who says, like he is or is going, like, definitely, if anyone is saying like, oh yeah, like they haven't confirmed anything, nothing is getting confirmed until July when this happens. That said, I would be shocked if Bobby stays on. Unless Microsoft is hoping that by 2023 people have forgotten and they can sweep it under the rug. But like again, like we've talked about, I think they have a better reputation than that, and I think that they probably do want him gone. I would imagine that he will step down. I don't think he will be the CEO. I think there is a possibility that they will keep him on as like some sort of advisor role to not like totally cut him off, maybe at best, but I do not think he will be CEO of that company once that merger happens. The downside of all of this is that Bobby Kotick is going to get his golden parachute and leave. I mean, like, no matter what happens, dude is going to make a ton of money off this instead of getting
I saw screenshots of I don't know if it was I don't know how verifiable this is, but I think we all saw those screenshots online of like kind of internal graphs of here's what he makes if he gets fired for cause, if he gets fired with an acquisition. Basically the bottom line is he will make $293 million from being laid off due to an acquisition, which is a crazy, ridiculous monopoly money.
I just don't. It just baffles me that like these kind of things can be put in place when people like everyday working. I mean, I don't. There's a lot tied to this, but like everyday working people can just be fired for no reason and get nothing and nothing. That's totally legal, and yet every motherfucking CEO of every motherfucking company has a specific stipulation for whatever reason that they are fired. There's a different sum of money involved, and it is just oh my god, I can't. I'm getting really angry right now.
He never has to work again, like he made $53 million, $63 million last year alone. He stands to make 290 some million from this deal next year. Like, this is a man who never needs to work again. Would he be brought on as maybe like advice? Like, if he left, would some other company bring him on? I wouldn't be shocked, honestly. But I do think like for him to step back or take a deal to leave prior to the acquisition, I think it's going to take another major development in this story about the culture at Activision. I think there's going to need to be some sort of like another story on the level of the journal the journal story from last month about like he knew when he was involved, like kind of a deepening of that. But I think at this point, like, there's no other news, I think he coasts until next July and takes his paycheck, honestly.
To me, when it was revealed, like either late last night or early this morning, I saw it this morning, the news that like they had considered buying Kotaku. I was like, how is the FBI not at your door right now? Like, how could you like it's just insane. Like I thought like that was like, all right, this guy has to go. He has to go. But yeah,
he should.
You think it's so funny, like how how detached he must be from like games journalism. Like, how much does he think a Kotaku costs? Like, it doesn't cost that much. These people are making like $55K a year, like, and they're glad to have a staff writer position. Like, I'm pretty sure you can afford it, dude. Yeah. You can personally buy Kotaku.
It was, but yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I mean, he's definitely out as CEO after the fact. There's, I think, as long as nothing kind of comes out over the next year or whenever this deal is done, I think that there is a chance that he could retain some kind of advisor position in the same way that I think Reggie might have some kind of advisor position at Nintendo.
Yeah,
he's always going to be welcome back, although we love Reggie.
But
I think there's also a chance he could be gone before next year.
About Bobby Kotick, that's where like we talked to 30 people who said this guy is an absolute piece of shit. Maybe if you get another one of those blockbuster kind of pieces, maybe he decides to spend more time with his family 6 months before the deal closes. But
yes,
I don't know how likely that is.
Yeah, totally. Like, if he does get out before, it will totally, I mean, in the same way that this deal has been framed, it'll totally be framed in the way of this is their choice. They're totally, like, still the CEO, but, all this.
Essentially, he's not going out in disgrace as he should. Like, that's the bottom line for me of this whole thing is, like, he should be leaving this company in disgrace with nothing, and he is going to
We want the Cersei Lannister naked march through town. Yeah. And it's not going to happen.
That is not going to happen.
Instead, he's going to leave with more money than I will ever see in 10 lifetimes, and that's the depressing kind of reality of it.
And maybe more.
Yeah, maybe more.
Okay. I want you guys to, take down, your hammer and sickle flags, take off the beret.
Sure.
I want you to take a straight shot of capitalism right to the veins. Okay,
Love it.
Can you do that for me? Because
let me
let's
just hit it
talk.
right now.
Let's be disgusting. All right. We've been good little. We can drop the facade. What we really want is Master Chief fighting Crash Bandicoot. All right.
A Spartan class in World of Warcraft. It's time.
Exactly. So let's do it. Let's talk about. Firstly, I want to talk about what games Microsoft is about to acquire, how they're going to implement them, and then I do want to talk about the Sony response, because I do think that that is interesting, and there's some interesting reporting there. So before...
I love that it's just a given that Nintendo will have no response and continue to make
just
adorable.
Do their own thing. 100%.
Nintendo is very, very smart, and just to get this off before we get into this, they were so smart during the Wii era to just say, fuck it, we're done with this. Like, we're done with competing with these two companies. We have carved out a completely different market, and like, you owning a Wii and an Xbox is two totally different things, and you will not have to choose between them. Yeah. Like, genius, completely genius. And I think we'll get into this more with Sony, but like, if Sony's smart, they will take the same approach here as opposed to trying to.
I completely agree, and I do, and I do think that Sony could be. Well, I don't want to say stupid because I'm not running a multi-billion-dollar company, but sure. I do think that what I hope happens is that Sony is like, we have faith in our IP, as they should. Yeah. We have amazing games coming out. People want our product. We don't need to make this move. And that's something that they, obviously Spartacus is on the way, and we'll get into that. But, I feel like they don't need to make a move. And I think Sony knows that they don't have to make a move. There's definitely conversations about potential moves. But I hope that when the dust is settled, they're just like, Horizon Forbidden West rules. God of War Ragnarok rules. And you're going to buy a PlayStation because the games we have right now speak for themselves.
We already have Sony moving into TV and kind of like IP. We have the Last of Us show on HBO and the big Uncharted movie, which doesn't look bad. Maybe
okay.
Moving out of
you
an
should see my face right now, Jen.
Yeah, I'm going to take some issue with that, but that's fine.
It looks like, it doesn't look like your typical like video game adaptation, which is just like makes you embarrassed to tell people that you work in the games industry. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think like
we feel very differently about how this film looks. When I saw that trailer, I was like, "Oh, this is embarrassing for me."
Tom Holland is still winning. I feel like that movie, like, will have like it is very like whatever, but I think it will like people who aren't game nerds will go see the Uncharted movie because it's Tom Holland being Indiana Jones, and it'll be cute and fun.
Oh, it'll be cute and fun. It will be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to derail your direction here.
I like that we just crucified you for saying that Uncharted looked fine.
But Jen, you
I don't think it looked good. I just think it looked
yeah, no, that's fine. That's
it was fair. Passing as a real movie and not as a video game movie.
Yeah.
But I do. But please, I do want to hear I think that's an interesting thought. So yeah, what were you going to say about that, Jen?
I do think like we were just talking about Nintendo, and I do think like Sony has to some degree, like in recent months, like been playing catch up with Xbox, but I think who they really might want to be playing catch up with is Nintendo.
Yes, agreed.
Doubling down on IP and they've done this already, with PlayStation Studios. That announcement that came out, like, was it 2020 or 2021? Like, I can't recall exactly, like, time is a flat circle, but they are doing this with their IP. And I think, like, I could easily at this point, granted we're 36 hours in, but at this point I could definitely see a future where Sony is an IP producer and not necessarily a console, like a hardware maker 10 years from now.
Yeah. I guess we're kind of jumping into the Sony thing now.
Let's jump into the Sony thing now. Let's jump into it.
I totally agree with you, Jen. I think if they are smart, and here's what I think okay, the unsmart thing that Sony could do in this situation, and it is probably the thing that they are going to do, would be like,
Konami.
yeah, is literally buy Konami or like, but like buy Square Enix, right? Like the panic move that they would do right now is like, okay, Microsoft's going to buy these companies if we don't. We're going to buy Square Enix. We're going to buy blah, blah, blah. We're going to buy this.
I really hope this doesn't happen as like a big, like, we're going to get to this, but I have very strong feelings about
all of our concerns would just be completely founded if this happened.
Like, Microsoft is setting off an arms race and Sony should not fall for it. Sony should be like, that's fine, buy those. Because like what Sony should do is like we were saying, the thing that they are good at right now is like these really good, like cinematic quote unquote games that are just these like really satisfying experiences, like these really big budget spectacles. Like they're making Hollywood movies, you know, as games, making those and then like adapting those into TV and adapting them into larger media. Like you're getting a Twisted Metal show. That's a thing that's happening soon, right? And like there will be a new.
I mean, Naughty Dog and Spider-Man alone, they could live off for the next 30 years.
Yeah, totally. And like what I think would be smart for them to do is instead of buying like Square Enix and trying to like buy Sega or whatever, is like do what they're doing now, which is like, hey, Housemarque made a really cool exclusive for you that is like in the ethos of Sony. Cool. Pick up that studio, small studio, have them just like be dedicated to making like one or two really, really good games every like couple of years. And then like
Sony's acquisition strategy seems to be like, you thought we owned them already. Now we actually own them, like with Housemarque and Insomniac.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I thought you already owned them. Cool, great. I think if they were smart, the thing to do would just be like continue what they're doing, which is we have relationships with these small studios that made one really cool game for us. We see potential for this to like be a franchise. We see potential for this to, you know, be a thing we can push as a movie, and then people will like the movie, and then maybe buy a PlayStation because they want to play the games. Like that should be their ecosystem. It should be like the entertainment to gaming, like the entertainment pipeline of like TV to movie to games. And if they were smart, they would do what Nintendo does in terms of like having its own little IP that you come to the system for, with the added caveat of like, oh, and you're going to, you know, also get movies and TV, so you're going to like all these IPs, almost like they're doing like their own MCU type thing, you know what I mean? Yeah. Where it's like, yeah, you're totally bought into this. That would be the smart thing to do here. Buying Square Enix and what's that?
It would be the smart thing to do, but I think all the signs are there to suggest that Sony isn't doing that.
Yeah. Well, and we'll see, right? Because like the acquisitions they did make in the last year were all like really, they made total sense. It was Housemarque, which did Returnal. It was Bluepoint, which did the Demon's Soul thing. It was the Astrobot studio. It was it was all these companies that were just making PlayStation exclusives anyways, and they were like, "Thank you, you're doing a great job. We have faith in you and we just want you to keep making PlayStation games." They haven't. Sony really hasn't bought like, I don't think like ever like a blockbuster third-party studio. I mean, you could argue Insomniac, but again, Insomniac was like largely doing PlayStation games except Sunset Overdrive. So I would hope that that's what they do. They just like pick up some indie studios, give them a lot more money, pump them up to make like bigger budget games, and then just like have your platform be the Hollywood platform, right? And that's it. Like that would be the thing to do.
How do you guys feel about them buying like because this has been the Twitter chat the last few days. Again, maybe it's skewed for my personal timeline, but the chat seems to have been like, Sony should buy Square Enix, Capcom, or FromSoft.
No,
like,
God no, don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that falls into I think that falls into the trap. I think if they make a move like that,
completely. But I'm curious as to what you guys think about like why that's not the move.
Yeah,
or, like,
I mean,
why they shouldn't, or
like why is it? I mean, I have a pretty strong idea as like why it's bad for players and bad for fans, but like why would it be necessarily like a bad move for? It might not be a bad move in the short term for Sony to buy a Square Enix, but I just, one of the many Square Enixes available.
Yeah. my thing is like, where does it end for them, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
because as soon as you play into the arms race, and as soon as Microsoft is like, oh, you want to
Yeah, we'll
play,
just
then it's like,
just buy Ubi at that point. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, then Microsoft's like, then we're buying Ubi, and then Sony has to be like, okay, well, we're buying EA, and like they're just gonna have to spend so much money. They're really gonna have to like start.
And they are
writing
not
blank
going to be able to
checks.
compete in that. And
No,
then
they just can't.
and then Sony eventually. I think that I agree that like maybe in the short term that might pay off, but I think that Sony has been able to see the future a little bit. I think they have had a little bit more foresight to just double down on what works well for them. Keep it small, keep it contained.
I do think Sony has been like a particular victim of the last 2 years with its like, like we gotta get a PlayStation in every house, like a chicken in every pot, or a PlayStation 5 in every house. And it's just like that kind of betting on the generational thing really kind of blew up in their lap.
Agreed.
But I also think at the end of the day, if you had to put a gun to my head, right, and and say, oh, you can only buy one console, right? At the end of the day, I just don't know what Microsoft could do. Like they're doing stuff to really make me consider. And granted, I play my Xbox more than I play my PlayStation.
Me too.
But
I so rarely use my PS5, honestly.
But when I use my PS5, it matters. I am using my PS5. When Horizon Forbidden West comes out, when God of War Ragnarok comes out, I'm going to be using my...
Yeah.
I can't see myself not buying a PlayStation because of Spidey, like, for me. Like, that, and then Wolverine. Like, those are two games coming out that it's like... Xbox, you can have all the exclusives that you want, but at the end of the day, I couldn't just have you,
Yeah.
And I'm living in a world where I don't have to choose, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah.
What have you been playing lately? Like the last 2 days, I've been playing Gnosia and Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, both on Switch, and it's just like. I don't really need a PS5 for that.
But you talking about that, like I have been playing my Switch lately because I've been playing Windjammers on it. A couple of other things. I for some reason jumped back into Ni no Kuni because I had a taste for it. But but I go through the same thing with my PlayStation. With my Switch that I go through with my PlayStation. There are sometimes months where I don't touch my Switch.
Yeah.
I never owned an Xbox before a Series X, and now it's like the one I use the most.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is a testament to what Xbox has managed to pull off here, is that they have gotten me to use the console in a way that I never even dreamed I would do with my Xbox One.
Yeah.
And
what I do agree with you on, Tom, is, and I think maybe this is what you're trying to say, is like, when you do use your PlayStation, though, the quality of the experience that you're getting is like much higher on average. That's kind of what I think.
The Xbox Series X is the McDonald's. Compared to the fine dining restaurant that I'm going to on my PlayStation.
It's like the Sony is going for like the HBO experience, and they're doing it, but they're not doing it frequently enough yet. And I feel like the last 2 years have not been great for Sony, to be honest.
That's a really, really good analogy. Yeah, it's like it really is. It's almost like the Netflix thing where Netflix like started to pivot away from like, oh, we got all these great movies, and more towards original content, which is like, the content has to be really, really good, like the exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And like, especially if it's not coming out super frequently in the beginning. And if we're gonna do the same thing where it's like 2 games a year, like last year, like we really didn't get many like Sony exclusives last year. Like, I don't think that cuts it. But if you're getting,
they still look great on PS4. Like Miles Morales plays great on PS4. Like up to this point, maybe Returnal being an exception, but up to this point we don't. And well, Ratchet and Clank, but I don't know that we have we don't have a God of War, a Last of Us that like you absolutely must buy this console, like
but
the PS5.
We will get that, right? Like eventually,
Yeah.
and I think that that's like what a lot of gamers understand. And I do love that HBO to Netflix analogy, because I think HBO seems to be doing seems to be making the quote unquote mistakes that we're worried Sony would make, where HBO is trying to play Netflix's game when they shouldn't have done that. They should have doubled down on what made HBO great, and now they're diluting, I think, their product a little bit by having max originals, not all of them being bangers, right? Whereas before, in the early days of Game of Thrones, like HBO was just like, when they put something out, it was great. And obviously Netflix has this kind of scattershot, shotgun blast approach to like, cool, we are just going to throw content at you, and sometimes that content is Squid Game, and it's one of the best things you've ever seen, but there's a ton of other shit covering your face at the same time.
Yeah, and I mean, if Sony were to buy Capcom, Square Enix, FromSoft, like, I don't know, if someone were to acquire them, I would almost prefer that it be Xbox, because it's like, I'd like to have access to those like older legacy titles, and I just don't think that that's a priority for Sony. So it's like, I'd love to play FF6 on my TV now, even if it looks like blocky pixel art garbage. Like, I'd love to play Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger like on a TV, or it's not on, neither of them is on Switch, and it's just like, I'd love to have that like retro library of games, and I don't think that's a priority at all for Sony. Whereas like Xbox, it's like, we can just put it in our data hive center or whatever. It just churns out and it's available. They don't really have to, because they have so much, like, I don't know, I just assume they have so much technology over at Microsoft HQ, they can just like spit it out. But this has also been, based on like, I did an interview with a guy, his name escapes me at the moment, but like, it was like the head of Game Pass, and he basically told me that like, a lot of the difficulty in getting like older games on Game Pass isn't because we can't port the games, it's getting the license holder, it's the legal rights. Any of these games we can easily like emulate or make perform better using the current hardware. So,
I think for me, like, I think all Sony would have to do to really succeed, instead of like, going the Microsoft route and trying to go really toe to toe with them, release like 5 really great must play games a year. Have a subscription service that gives you access to all of the other must own games of that quality from PlayStation history, and also fold into that subscription, you get all of the Sony entertainment, like Uncharted movie and
Spider-Man, Venom,
Just make it like a hub for all things Sony IPs. Like, it doesn't matter how many. Just like release 5 really high quality games a year. Like, that makes
God of Wars a year is a big ask, though. They're not doing that.
But I don't think it has to be 5 God of Wars. You can have something. You can have a small case You can have a small case game like Returnal. You can have a
Astrobot.
You can have an Astrobot, like, and I think that their strategy with the purchases that they've been making are putting them in a position where that is going to be the cadence and the norm, where we get like darling indie, one darling indie, one indie, like in terms of what we think of as an indie game,
sort of thing,
Which and I think I think PSVR 2, that's going to be an interesting way on how that shakes out and what that really brings to the table, because I think that could also insulate them from some of the pressure that they're feeling probably right now from Microsoft, and also kind of gives me hope that they're not going to play into Microsoft's chicken,
the arms race,
the arms race, because they've got a lot of things on their plate right now, and especially with PSVR 2 and making that a success. Hopefully they don't get distracted by this. Before we move on, I just want to address a couple of comments in the chat so people don't think I'm leaving them behind. DC Comics 1828 says, "What are your thoughts on Mark Zuckerberg Metaverse?" Sorry, DC Comics 1828, not going to be chatting about that tonight.
It's dumb.
It's dumb.
It doesn't need VR. The Metaverse is not VR.
Jen, your take on Mark Zuckerberg's Metaverse?
How can you make Zoom meetings like more boring and like,
and not work even less?
thing? And it's Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse. I think the metaverse already has existed for many years in games. Like I think it's gaming is way further ahead than social media when it comes to the metaverse.
Yeah. Short answer on that, but yeah.
Spiffy Fox 33 says you all are getting chickens. I really don't know what that's in reference to at this point.
Yeah, it's been we went off on a tangent. It was probably somebody said chickens. It had to have happened.
And Do Sydney says
Costco chickens, the lost
leaders.
Yep.
And then Do Sydney
reference.
Do Sydney says that better not be a sub towards Peacemaker. Peacemaker is an exception to the rule on the HBO Max original front. Loving that show. Talking about it on the Unranked podcast this week. And then any workout requests from people using channel points, we're going to get to that once we've finished this chat. But speaking of this chat, before we move on to the Xbox games thing, we talked about it earlier. I kind of want your do you guys think that Game Pass is going to be on PlayStation? Is going to be on your PlayStation?
Like Xbox Game Pass, or are you saying is Sony going to release Sony Game Pass?
Oh, well, that's happening inevitably. That's happening. I'm saying that
this week.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about Xbox Game Pass. I mean, I guess it's probably just going to be the streaming. Do you think there's a realm in which they have the Xbox store on there? Like how that works? Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's very possible that Sony puts an Xbox Game Pass app on some of its devices. Because again, Sony's not just consoles. Like
sure.
I think it makes total sense that you would see a Game Pass app on a Sony TV. Like
absolutely. Yeah.
Over a barrel to agree to it. I just don't kind of like personnel. If huge, many tentacled corporations can have a personality, I just don't see Sony kind of like being chill about that.
Yeah, it is hard to imagine. It's just a matter of like, are they going to be backed into a corner? And if they really don't want to play the game with Microsoft and don't want to buy up like Square Enix and stuff, but Microsoft does, like at what point will they just kind of have to? I agree, though. I think they'll be really resistant to it. Sony is obviously like historically really resistant to playing nice with anybody. Like it took so long to get crossplay on a Sony device. Like that's still a recent concept. So I totally agree. I think it's just a matter of like how much will their back be against the wall once you cannot play Call of Duty on a PlayStation, and like does it make sense for them at some point to just like get a huge payday from Microsoft to put the app on the store and get a cut of some transactions and call it a day?
It would be interesting to like take a deeper dive into, because like Tomas or a writer at Inverse did this story about MLB The Show and how basically like MLB forced Sony to put this previously Sony exclusive sports game on Game Pass. And I'd be interested to see some of the numbers behind that. Like how much did that like hurt Sony? Like it might be an interesting kind of test case for, the new landscape going forward.
Man,
I think
that was wild when that was
weird. If I recall,
expected.
If I recall, that game still sold really well on PlayStation. I don't have the in front of me, but I remember it being like on the NPD charts for that month, and being like very shocked by that. I was like, by it, and I think it still was. Again, PlayStation has its own ecosystem, like, and I think people who are really loyal to PlayStation and are a one console household, like, they don't.
I don't know that they have the same. I think they need to, like, we touched on this earlier, but I think like people at Sony would be well advised to follow the Nintendo strategy rather than Xbox. You know,
totally, 100%.
All right, now for the fun. Speculative. Sure. Let's just talk about the games, where we think everything's going to pan out, what we want to see happen with them, and then some other unique things that like I thought about that really complicate this whole process. Specifically Warzone and World of Warcraft. But before we get into that, here is a complete list, seemingly, of all the IP that Xbox has under their wing. We have blood, and I'm gonna say a bunch of things right now that no one I think is gonna remember. But I think if anyone does, it's gonna be Geo. Blur, Caesar, Call of Duty, Candy Crush, Crash Bandicoot, Diablo, DJ Hero, Empire Earth, Gabriel Knight, Geometry Wars, Guitar Hero, Gun, Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, Hexen, Interstate 76, King's Quest, Laura Bow Mysteries, The Lost Vikings, Overwatch, Phantasmagoria, Pitfall, Police Quest, Prototype, Quest for Glory, Singularity, Skylanders, Soldier of Fortune, Space Quest, Spyro the Dragon, StarCraft, Tenchu, I don't know what that is, Time Shift, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, True Crime, World of Warcraft, Zork.
Tenchu?
Zork, Jen, Zork.
Zork. But what about Knack 3?
Yeah, where's Knack 3?
Well, that's so cute. That is Sony's like secret weapon, right? They're like, don't worry, we don't need Square.
Yeah.
We don't need them.
I don't know Tenchu.
That's
yeah.
their big pocket in 2023. It's like, all right, you might own the world, Microsoft, but Knack 3.
Yeah, Knack 3. Knack is back. Can I say the most exciting thing to me in that list?
Go ahead. I'd love to.
It's Pitfall. Y'all, I grew up with an Atari 2600. It was not, I didn't grow up in the era of the Atari 2600. It was a hand-me-down console for me. I played a lot of Pitfall. That was like one of the first Activision games. It is just a side-scroller 2D original adventure game. That game kicks ass. They tried to make sequels to it. I don't know any of them were as good. Put the original Atari 2600 the game on Game Pass. The thing is, Activision has a ton of they made a ton of like Atari games back in the day, and I would be really sincerely curious to see if any of those get to Game Pass and if they like open up like a like retro classics wing of Game Pass that's like, hey, like we're gonna put these like really old games, because when you think about Game Pass, the thing about it is that like it has a ton of games, but it's not really like a museum of gaming history.
No.
It really isn't, and I noticed that every time I scroll through it.
It's deliberately like curated, but it's not like the same like as Nintendo Switch Online, where it's like here's like the 12 best games from the SNES or whatever.
Because, you know, I spent the last weekend, I had a 3-day weekend, and I was just playing a bunch of, like, Sega Genesis and Mega Drive games on the Switch Online, and I was like, this is awesome. This is so cool that I can just go play Shinobi 3, right? A game that, like, I've never played, but is, like, this total, like, old classic, or, like, play Contra Hard Corps or whatever. And, like, that is such a cool experience. And when I scroll through Game Pass, it's like, here are the games from the past 5 years that were popular that are on Game Pass, and it's like, well, I've already played these. You know, like, I want to play some like weird deep cuts, and I want to play like Atari games, or I want to play like, you know, PlayStation 1 games, or which I guess they could do now because they have Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon.
Like, oh my god,
I only want to play Super Nintendo Squaresoft games. Twiddling my fingers.
Totally. But like, you know, Game Pass is not that museum of classic games in the way that Nintendo Switch Online is. And I hope that this like ushers in an era of it becoming more of that, because like you are talking back to the 80s, you know, with Activision, like you really, it goes really deep. And my hope is that they're, my hope is that it's not just like, oh, we're adding Sekiro and we're adding the Call of Duty games and we're adding like the Crash Bandicoot 4. Like, I really do hope they go all the way back and are adding like, you know, their games that were on really early consoles, and you know, they make that part of Game Pass where it's like, hey, we're preserving history. Like, this isn't just, you know.
I hope, you know, in addition to getting the amazing remaster of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, that we also get the originals. In top of the insane trilogy with Crash, we get the original games. And I think there's a good chance that happens. You know, Phil Spencer has talked about off the cuff multiple times about the preservation of gaming history. And so I do think that this not only opens the door for that, but we are going to see more of that. It's interesting. Sekiro is not on this list. I wonder if that's just a mistake, or if Sekiro is if Activision doesn't have the rights. I mean, I know they published the game, but like
it gets into weird territory.
Rights.
Yeah,
I think they.
Well,
do.
I saw that on Twitter, so I don't know how. I think as publisher, they have the rights to the IP.
There's a bunch of weird games that are in a gray area that I don't know, like, if they technically have. The big one for me, and this would be like...
Banjo-Kazooie is like that too, where it's like, why hasn't Microsoft made a Banjo-Kazooie game? And I know with Epic, that is like an odd thing.
Well, they did make Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, which I always forget. The thing I was going to say is gone. It's gone from my head.
Oh, there you go.
Gone. No, it is the one game. So you get into these you get into these weird situations where, like, I don't know how deep the ownership goes. For example, the one game that I've been thinking about a lot, because it was one of my favorite GameCube games, and I like the idea of it potentially coming to Game Pass fills me with so much joy, is this weird game from like the GameCube PS2 era called Metal Arms: A Glitch in the System. It's this great third-person shooter, like very funny, very like irreverent humor, where you're a robot and the whole mechanic is you can hack other robots and they all have different abilities. Very cool game. It was like a Vivendi game. And then like there was a whole thing where like...
Is Vivendi Ubisoft now? Or am I getting my French...
Vivendi just doesn't exist anymore, right?
They don't exist, but like Blizzard picked up a lot of, I think, the IPs for Vivendi, like before the Activision thing. Like, and they picked up the studio that did that game, I know. So like... And that was before the acquisition. So, like, technically, I'm assuming that Activision has that studio since they merged with Blizzard. But, like, does that mean they have the rights to games like that? I don't know.
Because I just assumed because they're French, I was like, oh, they must be part of Ubisoft. But France.
That's the equivalent to like. The equivalent to like, oh, you're Italian, you must be in the mafias. Oh, you're French, you must be part of Ubisoft.
Yeah.
Heads up, GameSpot.com has a specific article titled, Will Microsoft Now Own Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice? In it says, publishers often acquire the IP rights to games as part of their publishing deals, but that's not always the case. And when it comes to Sekiro, the copyright for the game remains with From Software, not with Activision. Okay. So
fascinating.
Yeah. That's good on Miyazaki there. So I'm going to, and I think the precedent was set with Bethesda. I think the idea is that any future installment in any of these franchises is not coming to other devices. The current Game Pass, will it come to PlayStation deal notwithstanding? Who knows what's going to happen there? But I think that we are, a 2024 Call of Duty or whatever will not be on PlayStation. But I do want to talk about Call of Duty because there's an interesting...
I do too, as someone who mainly just wants to play Doki Doki Literature Club and Final Fantasy VI. I have a host of opinions about Call of Duty.
My big thing with it is that the way that Call of Duty currently works, right, is that there's Warzone, and then there's the yearly installments, but their Battle Pass subscription, or not subscription, but that the Battle Pass that you buy works across both. And what happens when Warzone is continuing on PlayStation and being supported on PlayStation, but there is no yearly Call of Duty on the platform? Are they going to discount the Battle Pass and restrict it? Like there is content as a part of that cannot be implemented and delivered to PlayStation users if Call of Duty becomes an exclusive.
I have a lot of unsubstantiated thoughts on this.
I love them. Let's hear them.
I feel like it would be a very good strategy for like the three studios who kind of rotate off duties on developing Call of Duty games to just make each of those kind of like, Modern Warfare, like each kind of sub-series its own live version of Warzone. I think they should kill Warzone and make like three... I don't know if you even need to kill Warzone. Warzone could be like free to play, dabblers thing, but like I think instead of having a once a year installment of Call of Duty, I think they should just make these games kind of live service. And I don't know, maybe it's from more of like a player's perspective, but it would just be interesting to see how they can like iterate upon the formula in more of like a season pass sort of way or a chapter sort of way like Fortnite does. rather than having to like launch a full new like campaign. I think like single player campaigns for Call of Duty, just no one cares. Let's drop the pretense. Like,
such a shame because they can be really good.
They have been good in the past, but I don't think they have been good recently. And I think like, maybe it's time to just kind of double down on like the multiplayer missions or like limited time events. But I think, kind of splintering, like letting each of those studios have a living game could be a very, lucrative approach where it's like, you want your Modern Warfare, you want your kind of retro Vanguard thing. And, maybe you can get it might be like a subsidiary subscription where it's like, if you want every Call of Duty thing, it's $10 instead of $3.99 a month for one, or you get all three for $10 on top of your Game Pass subscription. Like, I think there's a way that they could make that, sort of emulate the model of a GTA Online, where it's not very glamorous, but it's more of like, you turn these kind of internal franchises into more of a living game. And I also don't know like how much longer we're going to be able to, people are going to put up with like buying a new Madden every year. I think Madden should probably go subscription, and
Definitely.
any sports game should go subscription, and just kind of like update the roster. And I don't know how much longer people are going to buy those games, but they continue to top the charts. So that as long as they do, I think people are going to be, companies are going to be wary of changing up what works.
I'll throw like a really left field thing out there. Like, I don't necessarily think that this is going to happen, but I will throw it out as a possibility. I do think there is a very slim possibility that they still actually do release Call of Duty games on PlayStation. I think extremely slim that happens. But, because historically we're seeing like that's not happening with Bethesda or whatever. Call of Duty makes so much money, so much money that I don't know. Like, if you're Microsoft, are you really getting that much? Like, are you getting enough of the value back from that series specifically? Like Tony Hawk, sure, right? Crash Bandicoot, sure, right? You're probably going to get your money back with that by just putting it on Game Pass, making it exclusive, and getting people into your ecosystem. With Call of Duty, is it really worth it? Like, are you really going to get everyone and make up for like the money that you're losing on not having it?
Maybe they do single player on PlayStation.
Yeah, maybe, or the multiplayer.
Yeah.
I would.
Well, I mean, if that money that Call of Duty makes every year translates into new Game Pass subscriptions, I mean,
right.
like there's potentially like a lot. I mean, I just think that like Microsoft isn't fucking around.
Yeah, they're really
and I think that there's
Call of Duty experience on PlayStation that you couldn't get on Xbox. And then Xbox has these kind of like living, Destiny 2 style versions of the 3 different iterations of Call of Duty, which I gotta be honest, like I don't really like any of Activision's games. So.
Yeah, me too. I play very few.
Yeah.
I love that. We've been talking for like almost 2 hours, and you guys are like, but I don't really care about any of these games.
Genuinely, when I look...
I don't like shooty
Wait until they bring Guitar Hero back, all right? And then you're going to give a fuck.
But when I look back, at this is like a very good point. When I look back at like all the stuff that both Blizzard and Activision have published in the last decade, like I don't play fucking any of it, y'all. Like I don't know. Like it's but I mean it's not about me, obviously, but like I think they have like a really
you were sitting there like, why would Microsoft buy these games? Like
for like I think the new NPD report came out like a couple of days ago, and it was like the best-selling game was Vanguard, and then it was like last year's
it was Black Ops Cold War for the year.
Totally.
Honestly, so fucking bleak. But that's what that's the slop the pigs want, I guess. Like
and people like it. I get it.
A year and it's Call of Duty, that's fine. But I think making those games like Rockstar has clearly made a fuck ton of money for making GTA like an online thing as opposed to putting out a sequel.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of an instructive case here. And I think, I don't know about Bungie's financials compared to like a Rockstar, but like Rockstar clearly like is making so much money on GTA 5, GTA Online. Like, why wouldn't you want to try and fit your IP into that box?
Totally.
Yeah. I think there's like something we keep skirting over and not like really getting into. And we're running so short on time, so we shouldn't. But I just want to mention like the other big part of this that they're going to get from this that I think is going like really under the radar is like they're going to bring the new Call of Duty games to mobile. Like that's the big deal with getting King is like
PC and mobile market is a huge thing for this acquisition. Like Xbox sucks in Asia, and that whole market is very dominant with PC and mobile, and this is a great way in there for them.
Yeah, King is going to help them bring all of these games to mobile. It is going to help them build their cloud infrastructure so that it is like more viable. It is going to help them like get a lot of these bigger games running. I think this is the same reason that Take-Two bought Zynga for a ridiculous amount of money.
Yep.
I think they just did it to get GTA 5 on phones because they know that they can make more money than the acquisition cost by doing that. Like, I think that, you know, other than the Game Pass thing, which is the big thing that people are going to talk about, the thing that is actually, I think, going to have like the biggest impact for Microsoft is bringing next year's Call of Duty to mobile. Like whether it's via the cloud, whether it's via like an optimized version for mobile, whatever.
Warzone
like,
to it or something.
Even if they're a small player in Asia, but it's still like a top 10, like is still such a huge boon on their like financial statements. Like,
absolutely.
It's such a huge market. And it's one that Microsoft hasn't really tapped into. Like, you know, people aren't buying Xboxes in Japan, but that's starting to change. But historically, like it's been a console that people there have been very slow to adopt.
Definitely.
Do we think World of Warcraft goes free to play? And do we think it comes to console?
It definitely should. Yeah, that's a great move. But I think it would be maybe a FF14 style, like, added subscription thing. I would love to see FF14 on Game Pass.
And you got to imagine that if there is a subscription, like, I mean, there is a subscription involved in World of Warcraft already, but that just gets bundled in, right? They hike the prices, but you can play World of Warcraft.
I think that's like the obvious thing everyone is expecting. The only like, you know, joy buster I would put in that is Elder Scrolls Online is on Game Pass from the Bethesda deal, if I remember this right, and it still has its monthly subscription. So I don't know if they were smart. I think it does still have its monthly.
They charge for ESO monthly.
But 14 isn't on Game Pass, and it should be. And like, I think it, you know, the deal breaker would be that it needs to have that like an added month, and I think they can negotiate maybe like a preferential rate for Game Pass subscribers. I think that might be a strategy.
So you can so there is an ESO Plus membership.
Yeah.
That gives you access to the DLC, it gives you other bonuses, but you can still play ESO. There is a certain point in World of Warcraft, I think they level cap it, where you hit a level, you can't play beyond that.
Right.
You know what? I may be talking on my ass. I actually don't really know how that works.
Yeah, we don't know. None of us play MMOs. Whatever.
No one gives a fuck. We don't give a fuck about this acquisition, so we may.
Yeah, who cares? What are these games?
We don't care about the acquisition that we spent 2 hours talking about on a school night, no less.
It is a school night.
I just want Pitfall. I want the Atari Pitfall on Game Pass. I don't give a shit about Call of Duty.
To Geo, Pitfall alone was worth $68.7 billion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, before
I honestly, my biggest takeaway from this is like, I really like Sony. I love Square Enix. I just really hope Sony doesn't buy Square Enix because I think it's bad for all Square Enix fans. I think it's a bad thing. It might be good for Sony ponies, but it's bad for Square Enix fans.
Agree.
Yeah, is there
any acquisition any further acquisitions of this size will be bad for anybody, like no matter what company there are. Like if someone buys Capcom, that sucks too.
I think if Xbox bought Square Enix, I wouldn't be mad about it, honestly.
I would, because I play a lot of that stuff. They're like,
I mean, it would just kind of like be like, well, may as well, right? At this point, it kind of sentiment.
I feel like they would put out the retro games that people like, like they would put out the past library because why not? But I don't think Sony would do that. Sony is not into like pixel art from the SNES era.
I just don't want anyone to buy them because I like the fact that they release a lot of different stuff. Like, I mean, we're getting Triangle Strategy on the Switch.
God,
that seems really cool.
Also, a product of consolidation here. Square Enix, like Enix and SquareSoft, were two rivals back when, back when I don't know about when I was a kid, but back when my older brothers were kids.
Yeah, certainly. I was gonna say before Xbox was even a thing.
Yeah, like a Dragon Quest versus Final Fantasy thing, like that was a substantial rivalry. Was Dragon Quest versus Final Fantasy? They weren't in this, and now they coexist and it's fine, and they can be their own things. But at the time, I think people were very like. I imagine people were probably very like, oh, like they're just going to turn Dragon Quest into Final Fantasy.
Yeah, that's legit.
All right, guys. So it's late. So before we wrap up, any final thoughts? Any thoughts on the games before we head out that we haven't talked about?
No, on the games front, I think I'm excited to see what comes to it. Like, I will be happy to play some of those like. Classic, like especially again if they put like the old Crash Bandicoot games, if they put the old Tony Hawk games, like all that stuff, I'll be happy to play it. It'll be cool to see like franchises that are totally forgotten, like Gun, and Tenchu. You gotta get on the Tenchu train, Tom. It'll be cool to see those like get a second life and see if like they actually want to. If they have like enough data to bring that stuff back and have it make sense. Like I think from that perspective, that is the silver lining of all of this is like, it'll be cool to have Activision Blizzard not just be a COD machine, and to like potentially actually produce games and not just have studios like Toys for Bob just folded into the COD machine. They
have so much creative talent, and it'll be interesting to kind of see what they can do when they let it rip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but it's all bad. All this is bad. Cool. I'm putting on the happy face for this because I love games. I'm a Game Pass subscriber. It's going to benefit me. Cool. It's all bad. This should not happen. It is a dangerous, slippery slope, and. If it ends here, I'll be like, that's fine. We made it. We got out scot-free. But if like we really start hearing rumblings of Sony like responding in earnest and like Ubisoft go into one and EA go into another, like I think we will be in truly the darkest timeline. It'll be IGN put it the best way. They had an article that went up, I think today, that said it was by John Davidson that said. It's not the console wars, it's the content wars. Like that is what this era is. It is just going to be these people gobbling up content in the way that like streaming services do. And like
content.
What's that?
Sorry, I was just like sweet content as all of us work in the content lines.
We love content, folks.
Yeah.
That's my worry. I mean, I just don't want to see like the artistry of video games reduced to this like corporate like throwing money around war. And like we'll still get the game, so like who cares? It's cool, but like ultimately I just don't want to have people like have more reasons to have to own every console, like we already have that problem with subscription services with streaming. Like I don't want to have a subscription to Netflix and Hulu and Amazon to get every single show that people are talking about. So like we already have this problem with consoles, and if it's about to get worse, like really, really worse, like you can't have people spending like over $1,000 just to be able to play, just be able to buy the games, like it's such an investment already. I think it's bad. I think it's all bad.
No, I I am definitely in alignment with you on that sentiment. Anyway, we all have to go to bed. We all have we all have to go write about more of this in the morning. Jen, Gio, thank you so much for spending this time with me. This was an even more interesting conversation than I already knew it would be. Before we head out, you want to just drop where people can find you and all that jazz.
I'm antisocial, but you can find me on Twitter at Hello Jen Glenn.
There you go.
Or on inverse.com/games.
And I am at Mario Prime on Twitter. You can read my content on digitaltrends.com, and you can listen to me talk about other video games on the podcast Left Trigger, Right Trigger.
Yes.
Go ahead and subscribe to that if you'd like.
And we've had you on before on the podcast. Gio will have to get you on again, and Jen, we definitely have to get you on at some point. So we will make that happen. I am Great Britom on each and every platform. You can also find me at Inverse as well, and Input and all that, and then of course the Unranked podcast. Thank you so much, guys, for spending the time with me. I'm gonna get all those. You guys didn't see this, but I've been doing this thing where I've been doing workouts during my streams, and
Lasted on your core, and
yeah. So I have to. I'm going to actually push all the squats and everything. I'm making notes. I'm going to push all that to Sunday. Probably play some more check out some more Rainbow Six Extraction.
I ate 2 slices of cold pizza and had 3 glasses of wine, so I cannot match your deep core workouts.
It's not as deep as that. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, stay unranked.